Hey everyone, today, we're diving into an incredible story about medieval Ireland and the Normans. And back in the 12th century, Gaelic Ireland was a patchwork of over-kingdoms, each made up of smaller kingdoms. At the top of this hierarchy sat the High King. Now, don't picture this as some all-powerful ruler like you see in movies. This High King didn't control all of Ireland as a single state. Instead, he relied on tributes from other kings. Despite the fragmented political scene, Ireland shared a common culture and legal system, which is pretty cool when you think about it. And then there were the port towns, Dublin, Wexford, Waterford, Cork, and Limerick, run by the Norse Irish. These towns had their own vibe, with rulers separate from the Gaelic kings. Meanwhile, across the water in England, the Normans were on a roll. After conquering England in 1066, they took over every earldom and bishopric. Their influence didn't stop there. They also negotiated with Scotland, fought their way through South Wales, and set up lordships that were semi-independent. The Norman elite had an imperialist streak, and, according to historians, they looked down on their Celtic neighbors, viewing them as uncivilized. There were even early hints of the Normans considering Ireland as part of their ambitions. At the Battle of Clontarf in 1014, it's thought there might have been troops from Normandy fighting alongside the Dublin Leinster forces. By the time William the Conqueror took over England, the Normans had noticed Ireland's role as a refuge for their enemies. Some records even claim that if William had lived a little longer, he might have conquered Ireland without even lifting a sword. Talk about confidence. Fast forward to 105th Piping King Henry II of England was already hatching plans to invade Ireland. At a council in Winchester, he floated the idea of granting Ireland to his brother, William Fitz-Empress. The clergy were all for it, but the plan fell apart, allegedly because Henry's mother, the Empress Matilda, wasn't on board. Still, the Normans kept their eyes on Ireland. There were already connections between the two. Norman lords had married into Irish royal families, and alliances were made and broken over the years. By 1166, the political scene in Ireland was heating up. Rodrigo Crahor, the King of Connaught, was recognized as the High King, and he led a coalition of Irish kings to oust Diarmait Mac Murchada as King of Leinster. Diarmait, refusing to take defeat lying down, fled to England with his daughter Aoife, seeking help from Henry II. Henry gave him the green light to recruit forces, and Diarmait promised loyalty in return. This deal wasn't just about getting Leinster back. Henry saw it as a way to use Ireland in his own campaigns against the Welsh and Scots. Diarmait's call for help caught the attention of some powerful Norman lords, like Richard Fitzgilbert de Clare, better known as Strongbow, Robert Fitzstephen, and Maurice Fitzgerald. Diarmait made big promises, land, towns, and even his daughter's hand in marriage, to secure their support. Under Irish law, these promises weren't exactly legit, but Diarmait didn't seem to care. With a small force, he returned to Leinster and regained some control while waiting for his Norman allies to arrive. In 1169, the first wave of Normans landed at Bannow Bay. Robert Fitzstephen and Maurice de Prendergast brought a mix of knights, archers, and foot soldiers. They teamed up with Diarmait and began their campaign to conquer Leinster. The Norse-Irish seaport of Wexford was their first big win, and from there they raided the surrounding territories. Not everyone was happy about this invasion, and soon High King Rodri marched into Leinster with a coalition of Irish forces to confront them. An agreement was struck at Ferns. Diarmait got to keep his kingship in Leinster, but he had to acknowledge Rodri as his overlord and send the Normans packing. Diarmait agreed, but it was clear he had bigger ambitions. Soon after, more Normans arrived, including Maurice Fitzgerald, and they continued their campaigns. Diarmait wasn't just looking to reclaim Leinster, he wanted to make a play for the title of High King, and with the Normans by his side, he might just pull it off. By 1170, the stage was set for a monumental shift in Irish history. Richard de Clare, better known as Strongbow, had received financial backing for his invasion from none other than a Jewish merchant, Jos of Gloucester. This funding came at a heavy cost to Jos, as he was fined 100 shillings for providing the funds despite the king's express prohibition against such actions. With this controversial backing, Strongbow's campaign was underway. In May of that year, Raymond Fitzgerald landed at Bannow Bay with a small but formidable force of 10 knights and 70 archers. This was not the main army but an advance guard, a test of strength before the larger invasion. Raymond and his men established themselves at an old promontory fort at Bagenbun, using it as a base to plunder the nearby countryside. But the Irish and Norse-Irish forces would not let this stand. They gathered in numbers far exceeding Raymond's and laid siege to the fort. In what would become one of the most brutal and cunning moves of the campaign, the vastly outnumbered Normans drove a herd of cattle directly into the besieging forces. Chaos ensued. In the disorder, the Normans launched a counterattack, routing the enemy and reportedly killing around 500 while taking 70 prisoners. The aftermath was grim. These captives were executed with ruthless efficiency. The Normans mutilated them, breaking their limbs before beheading them and casting their bodies from the cliffs. It was a calculated display of power, designed to spread terror. By late summer, on August 23rd, Strongbow himself landed at Passage with his main army, 200 knights and 1,000 soldiers. He joined forces with Raymond, and together they launched an assault on the city of Waterford. Despite the defenders' best efforts, the walls were breached, and fierce street fighting ensued. By the end of it, 700 defenders lay dead, and the city was firmly in Norman hands. It was here, amidst the aftermath of battle, that Strongbow married Aoife, the daughter of Diarmait Mac Murchada. This union was not just personal, it was deeply political. Diarmait had promised Strongbow the inheritance of Leinster upon his death, solidifying their alliance. With this, the Normans and their Irish allies convened in Waterford to plan their next move, the capture of Dublin. But Dublin would not be taken without resistance. High King Rodri of Connaught assembled a formidable force to block the Normans' path. His army included contingents from across Ireland, Breffni, Meath, Oriel, and even had the backing of Norse-Irish fighters. But the Normans, ever adaptable, avoided confrontation by trekking through the Wicklow Mountains. This maneuver forced Rodri to abandon his plans. When they finally reached Dublin, Diarmait sought to negotiate with its king, Aoife Mac Ragnail. However, talks were merely a distraction. On September 21st, a Norman force led by Miles de Cogan and Raymond Fitzgerald launched a surprise attack, storming the town and capturing it. Aoife fled but swore to return. With Dublin secured, Strongbow and Diarmait unleashed a devastating campaign across Meath and Breffni, targeting monastic towns like Clonard and Kells. These actions outraged Rodri, who retaliated by executing hostages, including Diarmait's son. The old king returned to Ferns, where he died unexpectedly in May 1171. Diarmait's death left a power vacuum, and Strongbow claimed Leinster as his own, invoking the terms of his marriage alliance. However, under both Irish and English law, his claim was tenuous. Diarmait had legitimate heirs, including sons, and Irish kingship was not passed through marriage or inheritance in the Norman sense. Nevertheless, Strongbow managed to secure support from some, including Diarmait's son Domhnall Simonach, who likely saw the alliance as a way to preserve his family's influence. But Strongbow's hold on Leinster was far from secure. Almost immediately, the Anglo-Normans faced attacks from within and beyond Leinster. Murchad, Diarmait's brother, opposed Strongbow's claim, while the Irish of Desmond launched a fierce attack on Norman-held Waterford. Meanwhile, a fleet of Norse Gaelic warriors landed near Dublin, led by none other than Aoife. This attempt to retake the city failed, and Aoife was captured and executed publicly, a stark warning to others who might challenge Norman rule. Amid this turmoil, Rodri led a massive coalition army to besiege Dublin. For 2 months, the city was encircled, with the Irish hoping to starve the Normans into submission. At the same time, Norman forces in Wexford were overwhelmed, and their garrison at Carrick besieged. Under immense pressure, Strongbow proposed negotiations. He offered to recognize Rhodri as his overlord if the Normans could keep their conquests. Rhodri countered, demanding they relinquish all but Dublin, Wexford, and Waterford. Strongbow found these terms unacceptable. Instead, his forces launched a daring surprise attack on Rhodri's camp at Castleknock, catching the Irish off guard. Hundreds were killed, and the siege was broken. Yet even as Strongbow fought to maintain his position, his actions drew the attention of a greater power, King Henry II of England. And after Henry's departure, Ireland entered a period of intense conflict and shifting power dynamics. Shortly after he left, Hugh de Lacy moved to consolidate control over Meath, but soon found himself in a deadly confrontation with Tyrone Ua Rourke. The two leaders met on the Hill of Ward for negotiations, but the discussions quickly escalated into violence. De Lacy's men killed Ua Rourke, and his head was gruesomely displayed over the gate of Dublin Castle, a chilling symbol of Norman dominance. Around the same time, Strongbow launched an invasion of Offaly, raiding the area but failing to bring it under control. In early 1173, the Anglo-Normans found themselves stretched thin, as many leaders left to support Henry during the revolt of 1174 in England and Normandy. Raymond Fitzgerald returned to Ireland later that year and led a plundering raid into the Jayshee territory, despite its king's earlier submission to Henry. However, his campaign in Lismore was interrupted when a fleet from Cork forced his forces to retreat to Waterford. Soon after, Fitzgerald returned to Wales following his father's death. Donal Cuailnach, son of Diarmait Mac Murchada, took advantage of the Normans' distractions and attacked Strongbow's forces in Leinster, killing 200 men. Meanwhile, Irish forces under Domhnall Ua Briain, supported by Thomond and Connaught armies, expelled the Normans from Kilkenny and destroyed Strongbow's castle. Strongbow retaliated by leading a campaign toward Limerick, but his forces suffered a devastating defeat at Thurles. Thousands of his troops were killed, forcing him to abandon his ambitions for Limerick. Norman control in Ireland seemed to falter. Gerald de Barry noted that the Irish, emboldened by Norman disarray, rose up in a united effort to resist their occupiers. Following Strongbow's defeat, Waterford's Norse-Irish inhabitants killed the Norman garrison. Rhodri Ua Crahor, the High King of Ireland, gathered an impressive coalition from across the island, including kings from Connaught, Meath, Breffni, Oriel, Ulster, and the northern Nail. This formidable army marched into Meath, destroyed castles at Trim and Duleek, and advanced toward Dublin. However, the arrival of Raymond Fitzgerald's reinforcements forced Rhodri's forces to retreat. By 1175, the Anglo-Normans had regrouped and launched a brutal campaign in Meath, laying waste to the region and rebuilding their castles. They executed Magnus Ua Mael Sucklin, the king of Meath, consolidating their grip over the area. This violent resurgence set the stage for the Treaty of Windsor, signed in October 1175, in which Rhodri acknowledged Henry as overlord of the Norman-controlled territories while retaining control over the rest of Ireland. In return, Rhodri agreed to levy a tribute in cowhides and maintain order among the Irish kings. The treaty, however, proved fragile. Henry failed to curb the ambitions of his Anglo-Norman barons, who continued to expand their territories aggressively. Rhodri, for his part, struggled to maintain unity among the Irish kings. The instability became evident in 1176 when an Anglo-Norman army marched into Oriel, violating the treaty. The Irish of Oriel repelled the invaders, killing hundreds. Later that year, a combined force from Oriel and the northern Nail invaded Meath, destroying castles and driving out Norman forces. The death of Strongbow in May 1176 marked a turning point. Henry replaced his Irish representative with William Fitz-Aldhelm and later Hugh de Lacy, signaling his intention to strengthen his authority in Ireland. Meanwhile, in February 1177, John de Courcy led a daring expedition into Ullave, capturing Downpatrick and fending off attempts by King Rodri Mac Murchada to reclaim it. Henry convened a council at Oxford in May 1177 to reassert control over Ireland. He declared his young son, John, as Lord of Ireland, setting the stage for further conquests. Encouraged by this directive, the Anglo-Normans expanded into Desmond, Thomond, and Connaught, while John de Courcy continued his campaigns in Ulster. The Normans' presence in Ireland left a lasting impact. They introduced new agricultural practices, livestock, and crops while promoting the widespread use of coinage. Castles, a hallmark of Norman rule, began to dominate the Irish landscape. The arrival of the Normans also led to the formalization of land charters and the gradual adoption of elements of English common law. Despite their advancements, rivalries among the Normans and alliances with Irish factions fueled ongoing conflicts. Figures like John de Courcy and Hugh de Lacy frequently clashed, often manipulating Irish politics to gain the upper hand. The complexity of these alliances and betrayals underscored the fragile and volatile nature of Norman rule in Ireland.